at this Expedition Jeep. Let's see what we got. Well, we got a little shorty bumper with a synthetic worn winch. It is sticking up too high. As you can see, it's probably deflecting most of the air over the grill. I have not had any issues with heating on this, and I did take it up to high altitudes. Heavy duty axles, spindles. We got hydraulic steering, sway lock, ORC. The King shocks with reservoirs. There's the beautiful LT1 headers that GM makes. This is part of a snorkel shock reservoir. That's our coolant bottle. The snorkel's not functional, it's just there. Got an LED light. We got footsteps, which come in handy if you got to get stuff on top of your roof. Looks like we got a high lift jack. I'm not sure what that's for. We got speed bumps. These are 110 outlets. I think he's got them on both sides. Looks like we got a trailer hitch. All right, down here, it gets a little crowded. We got our cross-flow muffler, but it does go through a exhaust cutout. Not sure if you guys can see that. We wrapped the entire exhaust. We've got a Long Ranger tank in here, along with a stock fuel tank. Looks like we got airbags. This is our evap stuff. A lot of stuff in this Jeep. Oh, let's keep going. Just got stuff everywhere, which is typical of an Expedition Jeep. There's something up in here. I don't know what that is. I don't know if it's plant or animal, but I think it's supposed to be there. How about we take a quick look under the hood? Oh, look at that. Looks like a pneumatic sway bar disconnect, but it's not hooked up. All right, here we are with the hood open. More stuff. We got dual batteries. That's got the smart charging isolator on it. That's the Motec coolant reservoir, PSC. Down here is our switch for the exhaust cutout. We got a switch panel down here for all sorts of stuff. Obviously, we got the Atlas too. You know, I kind of like this idea. Always running out of cup holders inside the vehicle, especially when you have kids. This morning we are in a late model JK with an LT1. This JK is really highly optioned. I don't even know all the options this thing has, but we're going to talk about Expedition vehicles. And if you look at this vehicle, it's just got stuff everywhere, which if you need it is a good thing. We have this little switch panel over here, which I don't think that's a switch. That's a level sensor for a Long Ranger tank underneath. I think that's a flashlight. Not sure why it's hardwired in. We got a trailer brake, we got a snorkel, we got LED lights, we got roll bars. We do have an Atlas 2 transfer case in this vehicle. We got roof racks, we got all sorts of stuff. So I thought today I'd talk about what I think makes a good Expedition engine, because JKs are as diverse as their owners and everybody's needs are different. You might be happy with a stock engine if you've got stock size tires, you don't want to hot rod it, you don't really wheel, you just want to put it around town. But most of us, especially the Expedition guys, load their JKs down with stuff. And what do I consider Expedition? It's when you take your Jeep on long trails. I've been on trails that take days, and even out here in Nevada, on the other side of Red Rock there, we got trails that just go on and on. It seems forever, and yet end up out in the middle of nowhere. So if you're in the middle of nowhere, you want to have everything that you need with you. Food, water, electricity. If you break down, you want tools, maybe a small welder. And the end result is you end up putting a lot of stuff into your Jeep. But here's what I feel is important about an Expedition engine. It's not as important how fast you get there as you get there. It's kind of like in order to win the race, you have to finish. You could have the fastest car in the race, but if you don't finish, you're not going to win. So what Expedition guys want is, one, reliability, because reliability is really where it's at. You need to be able to get from point A to point B on the map. And you might go through some really treacherous terrain, trails. I've been on washed out trails up here that I didn't know if we were going to be able to get across. I remember there was one trail that we had to go across a washed out, I'm going to say an embankment bridge, kind of like over a dam. And it was narrower than the track of the tires, and it was just washing away. So we ended up having to go around like 30 miles just to get across that. So you might end up going hundreds and hundreds of miles on one of these trails, and you want to be self-sufficient. Obviously, having additional gas helps. I drove this Jeep up to Utah. It was about 400 miles with the Long Ranger tank, and I don't know exactly what mileage I got, but it wasn't too bad, and I was able to go close to 400 miles on a single tank. So you want an engine that's going to be somewhat efficient because you want the long range. That, unfortunately, is the opposite of a high-performance engine. If you get a fire-breathing 6.4 Hemi, you're not going to get the same economy as a little 5.3 LS. So we want reliability and we want economy. Of course, we want enough power to get where we're going. And some of you say, well, why not just use the stock engine? And in a lot of cases, you can. But when you start pimping your Jeep out to 7,000, 8,000 plus pounds, and yeah, I had a Jeep a few years ago that was 8,800 pounds, kept crushing springs. Then when they got some ambulance springs on the Jeep, it started to break brackets off the frame. So when you get a Jeep that's really heavy, you want an engine that's going to be able to haul it. You got to have at least 35, 37-inch tires, and a lot of these Jeeps have 40s to go over the obstacles. You got to have differential clearance. The larger circumference of the tire, the smoother the ride's going to be over the bumps. So now we have a heavy Jeep, and aerodynamically, these Jeeps are usually worse than a stock Jeep because you got stuff hanging out everywhere. This Jeep's got foot pegs and stuff on the side and canopies and stuff all over it. So you got a lot of aerodynamic drag. And at that point, the little V6 just kind of gives up the ghost. And I want to back up a second on the economy. You also want to be able to run the crappiest fuel you can find, and that's important because if you do go down into Mexico, and a lot of our customers do go into Mexico and live in foreign countries, and they do have to run low-grade fuel. So ideally, you don't want a high-compression engine that's going to require premium fuel. You want something that'll run on anything you can put into it. So that narrows the field a lot. A lot of guys say, oh, I want a 6.4 Hemi, I want a 6.2 LS3, LT1. But the reality of an Expedition motor, it has other priorities. So here's my favorite Expedition engines. If you have a Jeep that's not really, really heavy, and you don't do a whole lot of highway driving, I still think the 5.3 LS is a viable option. The 5.3 LS is like 330 horsepower. It will run for hundreds of thousands of miles, especially the iron-blocked 5.3s. I have one in the original JK that we did in 2008. It's pushing 300,000 miles now, and it still doesn't burn a drop of oil. The 5.3 LS is not a fire-breathing engine, but it's got plenty of power. And some guys say, well, it's not that much more than the Pennstar. The Pennstar is like 280. You're only at 330. What you have to consider is the torque. The 5.3 has a lot more torque than the V6, and it has the great 6-speed transmission. So the extra cubic inches, the extra horsepower, and the better transmission make it a great Expedition engine. We still do 5.3 LSs today, but not that many because the supply is running out. But I can tell you, over the years, we've done some of the hardest core Jeeps that we've built with 5.3 LSs for the biggest name guys. Why? Because these guys basically trailer their Jeep out to the trail, and then they go out and beat them up on the trail, and they don't need more than 350 horsepower. If the 5.3 LS won't hack it, step up to the 6.0. The 6.0 really doesn't have a lot of downsides, but it does have one. The LS 6.0 has become a favorite for the Expedition guys, for good reason. The 6.0 is about the most bulletproof engine out there for our Jeeps. And that's not just amongst the GM engines, that includes the Chrysler V6s, the Hemis, and anything else you see out there being put in the JK. The 6.0 LS has proven itself over the last couple of decades, and yes, there was a Gen 3 version of the 6.0 LS, to be one of the most rugged and reliable engines you can buy. It'll run on crappy fuel, it will take abuse. I only know one 6-liter engine, and it's so rare to see any of our engines actually fail. You know, maybe a push rod bent here or there. I can only remember one 6-liter engine in all the years we've been doing this actually fail, and it didn't really fail. It was a guy at Moab. He was going up, I don't remember which trail, but he rolled the thing on his side, and it wasn't just on his side, it was kind of on its side and top. And he decided to crank the engine and see if he could start it. Well, it had sat there for about a half an hour waiting for the rescue guys, and the oil had pulled up in the heads. So when he cranked it, it cracked the starter motor because it hydrolocked, or oil locked, should I say. They got it on its wheels, pulled the plugs out, got all the oil out of the cylinders, and the engine started up. Customer called me and said, hey, it's got a slight tick. but it runs just fine. He drove it from Moab to our shop in Vegas. We found that it had a bent rod. That engine ran just like normal, other than it had a slight tick. So we took it out. He decided to do a little bit of upgrades to it. We took it to the machine shop that I work with, and they put a mild cam in it and all that. And you guys know how I feel about that. But he did end up getting about 400 horsepower. And that 6-liter engine not only survived, but got him home with a bent rod. The 6-liter's got a lot of torque. It'll haul a heavy JK, even 6, 7, 8,000 pounds. Now, no, it's not going to haul it like an LS3 or an LT1, but you're going to go down the road with authority. You're going to be able to pass. You're going to be able to hold your speed at high altitude, like going over the I-70 in Colorado. It might downshift a little bit, but you're basically going to be going with the flow of traffic with very little stress. Unlike the stock V6, it's going to be screaming just to try to stay up to the speed limit. I drive 6-liters all the time on the highway at 80 miles an hour, and they're very, very low-stressed engines for heavy vehicles. One thing you have to understand about the 6-liter engine is GM set them up for heavy-duty trucks. So they're very conservative on the tune, spark timing, performance enrichment, because they know the engine can have a high duty cycle, which means you got a gardener or a guy hauling garbage or a guy hauling lumber like I was the other day. I got an LS 5.3 in my little truck. It was filled to the top to where I had to pump up the air shocks just to try to level the bed, and I couldn't. And I had to drive some mountain roads up in Utah that were at high altitude. That little 5.3 did just fine. But I was in the throttle a lot, so I had a high duty cycle. GM decided that to get reliability out of this engine, they had to back all this stuff off. So while the 6.2s are rated over 400 horsepower, the 6.0 was rated at just over 300, basically between 330 and 355. We get about 380 horsepower out of the 6-liter by putting in a half-ton tune. The half-ton tune is more aggressive, it has more spark timing, it has better fuel delivery, performance enrichment, and the drivability is just as good, if not better. Now, I will say, if you go to the half-ton tune, you do have to run the better grade fuel. You could probably get away with mid-grade. Remember, a lot of the 6-liters have high-performance heads on it. So, to get the maximum out of it, you want to run the best fuel you can get. But the flip side is you can run the crappy fuel. You'll just get worse economy and less performance. So I think when it's all said and done, the LS 6-liter is the king of all Expedition engines, right up through today. You know, the 5.7 Hemi is nice. The LS 6.2 truck engines are great. I have one in my Jeep. But if I had to pick one engine that had to go the distance, and I had to count on to go through a desert or a snowstorm, it would be the 6-liter LS. Its proven track record, reliability, the ability to run on low-grade fuel, iron block so it's more stable, no active fuel management, lifters to damage. It's just a very, very durable engine. GM did equip it with variable valve timing. We have never had a problem with VVT on the 6-liter and basically most of the other LS and LT engines. A lot of guys say, oh, I want nothing, I don't want anything, I don't want VVT. But the VVT does give you more torque. You can feel in a 6-liter at 3,500 or 4,000 RPM when that cam phases, that burst of power. It really does help. So I would run the 6-liter with VVT. Now the two favorite 6-liters we run are the L96. The L96 is probably the most prolific engine. It was put in pretty much all the heavy-duty trucks that didn't get diesel engines. So if you got a 2500 or 3500 series truck and you didn't get a diesel engine, you probably got an L96. And you probably got it with a 6L90. 6L90 is a beefier version of the 6L80. Do you need to run the 6L90? No. We run most of our conversions with a 6L80. Can you run the 6L90? Yes. It's larger, it's heavier, it's got a different output shaft, but we can support it. One word of warning, the 6L90 cannot be converted to a two-wheel drive as easily as a 6L80. 6L80, essentially, you cut off the output shaft and put a couple of seals and plugs in. 6L90, the output is actually different. So you'd have to tear the transmission down. The L96 came in everything. Cab overs, box trucks, Silverados, you name it. Millions were made. In fact, this engine is so good in 2014-15, when GM obsoleted most of the LS lineup to go to the LT lineup, they didn't have an engine to replace the 6-liter. So they kept making it. They kept making it right up through about 2020 when the new LAT came out. It tells you the value of that engine at GM. It carried the torch for GM and their heavy-duty trucks for over 2 decades. There is a variation of the L96 I want to talk about, and that's the LC8. The LC8 is essentially the same engine as the L96, but it's set up for alternative fuels, natural gas, propane, whatever you want to put into it. So the hardware is non-corrosive, and I think some of the fasteners and maybe some of the other components are just made out of different materials to handle the more corrosive fuels. Either way, you can't go wrong with an LC8 or a L96. So in my opinion, and a lot of others, the 6-liter still probably is the king of the Expedition engines. It does not get the best economy, it does not have the best performance, but it will go the distance. The engine will last for hundreds and hundreds of thousands of miles. If there was an engine that could be abused, it's the 6-liter LS. Not that you want to abuse your engine, but if you did run it low on oil or ran it out of coolant, that's the engine that would go the distance. The 6-liter was a heavy-duty truck engine, so it was put in vehicles 8,501 or above pounds. The JK is really a half-ton SUV, so in most jurisdictions and by federal law, you can't put a heavier-duty engine in a lighter-duty vehicle. Now, you can go to a lighter-duty engine like out of a passenger car and put it in your JK, say an LS3 or an L99 or an LT1, but you shouldn't put a higher gross vehicle weight engine in your JK, at least higher than half-ton. But the good thing about that is all the half-ton trucks, Silverados, Denali's, Escalades, those engines are available to you. And they did make a 6-liter half-ton engine. It was called the Vortec Max. It was different than the heavy-duty 6-liter. It had an aluminum block, and it was set up for more performance, just like the other half-ton engines. And my final choice for an Expedition engine, and this might be a little bit controversial, would be the 5.3 LT, the LED2 or the LED3. The LED2 and the LED3 are Gen 5 engines. The 10-speed transmission is a Gen 5 transmission, and some of you say, oh, it's too advanced, it's too much technology, it's got direct injection, it's got high compression, it's got all this stuff. But over the last few years, I've come to respect the 5.3 LT a lot. We've seen them abused. GM puts them in their standard trucks. Go out and rent a U-Haul. You're going to get the 5.3 LT most likely. And guys drive the crap out of these and they don't break them. As far as performance goes, I'm going to say the 5.3 LT will just slightly outperform the 6-liter LS. And a big part of that is the transmission. Going to a 5.3 LT, if you had a 6-speed, and yes, they did make the 5.3 LT with a 6-speed, you're not going to get the benefit of the high gear transmission and keeping that engine in its power band. So if you get a 5.3 LT with a 10-speed, they're amazing, amazing powertrains. I think they are overlooked. I think that they have more power than most people need. They get good economy. They can run on regular gas. They tend to run cool. Pretty much everything about the 5.3 LT makes an excellent Expedition engine. If you have a technical phobia where you absolutely don't want that technology, then do not get the LT 5.3. But if you're willing to accept that technology, then there are benefits. You're going to get about the best economy you're going to get in an LT. Better economy than the V6, better economy than the Hemis, and better economy than most of the LSs and LTs that are out there. The LT 5.3, in my experience, like the other LT engines, will run on the lower grade fuels, but prefers the higher grade fuels. So if the higher grade fuel is available, you put it in. If it's not, it will run in the regular gas. So you have your choice. You're most likely never going to be lacking for power. That little 5.3 with a 10-speed really moves. I would say it's somewhere between a 5.7 Hemi and a 6.4 Hemi. It's somewhere between a 6-liter LS and a 6.2 LS. It's a very powerful engine. So you're not really giving up much there. When you consider the economy, the power, and the drivability of the LT 5.3, I would say it's on par with the LS 6.0 and better than anything else out there. The one thing that the LT 5.3 does not have compared to the LS 6.0 is a track record. Now, it has been out since 2014. Most of the engines were 6 speeds at the beginning, and then they went to the 8-speed, then they went to the 10-speed. But it's earning a track record. The reviews on the LT 5.3 have been very positive. I think GM has a winner with that engine, and I think it would make the perfect engine, not only for an Expedition JK, but for almost any JK. If you got 40s and you got a lot of weight and you want to be a hot rodder, then yeah, go ahead and get the 6.2. But I do think the 5.3 is overlooked. I think it's underrated, and I think more of you guys should look at that engine. So what engines would I not want in an Expedition vehicle? Well, of course, you don't need a big cammed LS or LT rumpity rump when you're crawling off-road all day. And here's another advantage of the LT engines. They can produce power without sacrificing drivability. When compared to, let's say, an LS3, which has a very light rump to it, or a 6.4 Hemi, the LTs idle at 450 RPM. They can crawl all day and they run cool. And I do love the 6.2 LT. I think an L86, L87, even an LT1 would be awesome off-road. But they're going to use more fuel than the LT 5.3 off-road. Being larger displacement, they're going to run warmer. I really don't have a problem with the reliability, but at the end of the day, if what you're looking for is an Expedition engine that's going to cruise you down the highway at 80 miles an hour in style, then you're going to get off and run trails for days on end. The LT 5.3, I think, would be a better choice than the LT 6.2. Now, if you're the kind of guy that wants to hit the road and you're a hot rodder and you want to tear up the highway, then you want to go off-roading. Well, of course, the LT 6.2 is going to do that. It's just not going to be as good of an Expedition engine as the LT 5.3. So this video is getting long, but those are my three choices. The LS 5.3 is a great engine. Biggest problem with that engine right now is availability. The LS 6.0 I still think holds the crown. I think in the near future here, the LT 5.3 will take it over at some point because the 6-liter is getting long in the tooth. And then, as mentioned, the LT 5.3, because it has slight advantages over the 6.0 in almost every category, but it just doesn't have the track record, and it is a more complex engine. So we're going to hit the trail with this Jeep, and we'll see you soon.